I'd like to start when I first came to Miami. I thought, oh my God, the humidity was so awful there. And I thought, I'm never gonna make it. I'm never gonna make it. And when Edward got involved with this company, and the reason we came down was for him to get involved with this company, I realized also I would hardly ever see him. He was putting so much time into the company, and the only way to keep a relationship somewhat going was for me to get more involved. My daughter was dancing down in Coral Gables, and I was taking her to a little school that was quite good down there, but the drive was horrible. I was coming in from the beach, and with the traffic, it was taking me over an hour to get down to Coral Gables and another hour or even more to get home. And after a couple of years, I'm not sure of the date yet, when Edward had started getting the company fairly successful with the dancers and we had enough money, he decided to do a nutcracker. And we auditioned kids from all over the areas of Miami, because we needed children. He was doing the George Balanchine version of the Nutcracker, and I believe there were like 60 kids. And some of the kids had to be very, very good. They were doing very difficult steps at 10, 11, 12. And although there were schools that had those kinds of children that could do those steps and do them very well, I might add, they were doing their own nutcrackers. And so they obviously didn't want to have their kids leave to do our nutcracker, because then they wouldn't have their students performing in their production. And their production was all children, and they needed all the children that they had in the school that were dancers, serious dancers. So after that first year, I decided that maybe we needed a school. And I talked to Edward and I said, look, I'm tired of driving Krista down. I want to start a school. And we had a building. It was the old Bonwit Teller building on Lincoln Road. That road was pretty abandoned at the time. A very nice man, Stanley Levine, had that space, and he offered it to us for a very good price. That's how we got that building. And there wasn't much traffic there. And Edward said to me, well, you go ahead and start a school, but I'm not giving you any money, and I don't want you to advertise at all because you're going to upset the other schools. And he kind of just left me there hanging. But what he did do was work with me and gave me 2 studios after 4 o'clock. We had 3 studios, a very large studio and 2 tiny studios. And he let me have these 2 studios to see what I could develop. We started with like 20 kids, and a year later we had 120 students in that school, just from networking with parents of schools I knew, and because of Edward's reputation and all of that, it just started to grow. And I think when parents came, we didn't start it till January, right after Nutcracker. I think it was the second Nutcracker. But word of mouth, I think, got out that there were some good teachers there. And the reason I was able to figure out the teachers was some of them were our dancers' partners or wives or husbands that were around that weren't dancing in the company, that knew a lot about dance. And also I had a little bit of an eye because I was a former figure skater, an Olympian, a national champion of Canada, and I, had worked coaching a little bit, so I knew what I was looking for in a coach. And I had also watched Edward teach a lot, so I knew what teachers should do and how they should work, and I knew what some of his philosophy was. So we started the school. It was fairly small until we got into, I might add, we then became, because I was called the Dance Center, I wanted to become the official school of the Miami City Ballet. And so I begged for them to change my name to the Miami City Ballet School, which they refused to do for a few years. Once we got into the big building, I begged them to please let me be the official school for you. Biggest mistake of my life, by the way. And they said yes. And I was very happy at the time. We go in, we become the official school, we now called the Miami City Ballet School. I give the company $80,000 to hold for me. We had saved up as a little bit of a slush fund. Never saw that money again. And every dime I made, they put into the company, and we struggled. I was the one that not only founded the school, I also was the one that worked with Homeland Security to bring in, so I could bring in international dancers. And I did create, I think, one of the best schools in the country. We had dancers at the end of my term there that are literally dancing, were dancing all over the world, from the Royal Ballet to the New York City Ballet to ABT to Boston Ballet, you name it. Kids dancing in companies. Invariably, you'd read that they had studied, one or two of them had studied at Miami City Ballet. I guess I'm upset in a way because the board has never acknowledged me. They have struck me from the school entirely. Yeah, so unfortunately, Miami City Ballet has now decided that I didn't exist. They don't have my name anywhere. There's no recognition that I did this school and created such a wonderful school for them to continue getting dancers from. And it's like my husband, Edward. They've taken his name off as founder. And you can't find his name as the founder of Miami City Ballet anymore. They've decided to erase both of our names. And I think that's not very nice. The school has been, we had a lot of problems because we did not have a board that really supported us. I feel that they didn't understand how important a school was. And with our summer program, we brought in a lot of international dancers who would come to study with us. And so we had a large field of very talented dancers we could draw upon for Edward to start using if he needed dancers, or if he needed extra dancers for a large ballet. He now had an apprentice program that he could develop by taking very good dancers and start to use them in the company, in these large ballets, to see how they worked, how professional they were, what their temperament was, and all those things you need, because you can't hire a dancer when you see them once and not know what you're getting yourself into. So that was an added plus for him. We would do a showcase every year, and again, I wish that the board had been more supportive. I did some fundraising myself, and we did have people to help write grants for us, and they got some grants for us. But again, it seemed we never saw our budget really. The money went to the company, and I felt we never got any person that came and sat down with us and talked to us about the budget or what they had brought in for the school. I do know on our summer program, we raised a lot of money because I was in charge of that. I made the classes. I arranged for the University of Miami for housing and food. I arranged busing. We arranged activities and RAs. And with our budget, the money that we brought in and the money we spent on all those things, we ended up with over $300,000 that was ours, that we could use. It was what we made. That's what we netted. And again, we had situations like one summer I went to the University of Miami to get the food organized, and I found out that Jonah, who was our treasurer, hadn't paid them for last summer. And we were 2 weeks into all these kids arriving from Europe, from Australia, from South America, from Canada, all over the United States, and the University of Miami was not going to let us stay there. And they hadn't told me because it had supposedly been going through this man, Jonah. And he never said a word, and he just didn't pay. And I was told I had to bring down a very, very large check to the university for the food this year. I think for the food that they owed money to, it was still $25,000. And that if I didn't bring it down by 5 o'clock that day, that they were not going to feed the students, and that this year they wouldn't adjust any of the prices. It would be one flat fee. So if a student got sick and left, or if if kids, if a student got sick and left and they weren't there for the rest of the summer, they would adjust the prices. They were very, very wonderful people. They were so angry with us, and it put such a horrible taste in their mouths about what Miami City Ballet School was. And it made us look so bad. And it had nothing to do with us. We had to rely on the company treasurer to pay, and he wasn't paying. The same thing would happen on the activities. All the parents paid up front for the activities. And then when we went to do the activities, no, Jonah hadn't paid the down payment for them to do the activities. So we were always rushing around trying to catch up on bills that had been money that had brought in by June or even April. The first half was due in April. I think the second half of all the monies were due in June. We had monies in April for him to start paying all of these bills. He never ever paid them. And it always left us rushing around at the last minute trying to make do and trying to scrape by to get the money, because he had put all of our monies into the company. So we never had money. And the day I had to take that $25,000 check down to Coral Gables, it was 5 o'clock, 4:30 or something. There was no way I could get there by 5. I told them maybe 6 o'clock. They waited for me till 6 o'clock. I just made it. And I had to deal with all this traffic and be there by 6, otherwise we wouldn't have been able to feed our kids for the summer. And these things constantly went on. And we just felt that we were treated very, very poorly at the school. And we never had a budget issue or a money issue before we joined Miami City Ballet. And a lot of times they tried to stop us from even doing a summer program. And if it wasn't for Edward, we would have not had a summer program. There was another instance where I needed dorms for the kids, and they wouldn't ever allow us. They would never put themselves out to even look at the possibility of having a dorm. Well, my daughter knew a guy whose father owned some buildings. So I finally went and talked to this man about taking one of the buildings that he was renovating that was very close to Miami City Ballet and allowing us to take like 8 apartments. And they were big apartments, and they had 2 bedrooms, and we could put 2 in each room. And so we could have about 20 kids, maybe 16 kids, plus an RA that stayed there with them. I went and had a huge meeting with them, and then they came to the Miami City Ballet to our boardroom, and they sat there with our president of our board and a number of other board members and me and this person. And I said, can we want to do this. This is the budget. I had a price. This was what we were going to charge them. I worked out the pricing. I went to Jonah and told him, our treasurer, and said, this is what we're going to be paying monthly, and this is what the kids are going to be paying to stay there. So as you can see, we will be making money on this. Everything is going fine. This was done in June. The kids were coming for the winter in September. A week before the kids are arriving, when everything is done, ready to go, parents have canceled their children's schools at all these different conservatories. They've given up other programs in New York or Boston or wherever to send their kids to Miami City Ballet to train. They've given up, they've changed schools, they've done everything. A week before, the president of our board comes up to me and says, "We've changed our mind and we don't want you to do a dorm." And all I could remember myself saying was, "This is not acceptable. This is not acceptable. This is not acceptable." That's all I remember. And I did not listen to her. There's nothing I could do. I said, you call all these parents, call this person who's coming in from Australia, the mother's flying in 3 days, you call and tell her you've changed your mind. You call these people from Brazil and tell them you've changed your mind. You call this person that was supposed to go to, I forget the name of it, in North Carolina School of the Arts, and they turned it down to come and train with us. You call and tell them. And she walked away, and I never talked to her again. And I guess they thought I was difficult. But those are the facts. Those are the actual facts, and that is what happened. And that was how I had to deal with this board. And I'm sure it's different now. But at that time, there were a lot of very nice people on the board, but I just don't think, and some of them did show up, and some of them did support me. But there were a lot, I'd say 2/3 of the board did not understand the importance of a school, the amount of money we were bringing in, and how important it was to develop dancers for our company in that manner and fashion. I want to talk about Sleeping Beauty for a moment, because that was the last ballet we did. And I know that people are saying that, we lost money and Edward got fired because he couldn't stay within budget. I want to tell you for a fact that Edward always gave the board 3 choices of a budget: a very low budget, a medium budget, and a little bit over the top budget. And they always picked the over the top budget. And when they wanted to do Swan Lake, they went on and on and on. I mean, not Sleeping Beauty, sorry. They went on and on and on about there was no way they could raise money unless they did Sleeping Beauty. And I heard Edward say a number of times, "We can't afford it." And he said, on top of that, you've got to pay for fencing lessons and this lessons. And there was a lot of things that you had to do. Plus the set was huge and they had to rent it and it was going to cost a fortune. And then the costumes, all of this was going to cost, so much money. And I will say that Robert Gottlieb came down to my office and said to me, "Linda, you have to talk Edward into doing Sleeping Beauty. That's the only way we're going to raise money this year. You have to talk to him about it." We did Sleeping Beauty, and they never raised the money. And then they turned around and blamed him. That's what I want to say. The way our monies worked was every year in February, they would send out subscriptions for the following year. And that money would come in and they would start spending it instead of using that money for the following year, because they were very low on money. We were always low on money. We would be relieved because now we could pay our bills till the end of the year. Then the summer program came along, which infused another couple of $100,000. And then we would start our fall season, and by November we were out of money again for the whole rest of the year. I can't tell you how many nightmares we had about wondering where our next payroll was going to come from. It was a disaster. And what they would have to do is call ahead to Naples to see if they could get an advance on the Nutcracker monies that came in there that they owed us, so we could get through to Christmas. After Christmas, I can't tell you how many miserable New Years I've spent because we didn't know if we were going to have to tell our wardrobe and our staff and all of the people we wouldn't be able to pay them. it was that dire, and it was a struggle, and people would be calling different board members to see if they could pay a payroll here and there. They just were not raising any money, or the money that they should be raising for the ballet company that they wanted. And that's how we survived from year after year until till February came, and they started bringing in money for box office again. So it was a constant struggle to make a payroll. Well, there was a certain commissioner that disliked us intensely. And the reason was, it had to do, I believe, with Elian Gonzalez, and or maybe it wasn't that. It was about the Cuban ordinance, which said that if we did business with anybody in Cuba, we would immediately lose all of our grants, and we would not get money from Miami. And our manager, our executive director, felt that that was not fair and not right. What if we wanted to get some ballet slippers from Cuba or whatever? I mean, it was a really harsh thought and idea. And this person, commissioner, was not happy. And the first thing he did was he brought a crew around. We were going to the Kennedy Center honors, and it was always the first week of December. And I know it was him that did this, because when I went to the board meeting for our little Lagos Island Association, it came out that it was him. We went to the Kennedy Center honors, and when we came back 3 days later, there was a note on our door that they did not like. We needed to have our house repainted, the whole house repainted. We had a very nice big house on Lagos Island, and the shutters needed painting and everything needed repainting. And we had 20 days to do it. I think I still have this form. 20 days to do it. And if we didn't do it within that 20 days, we were going to be charged $1,000 a day. And so I had to get it done, and thank goodness I knew somebody else that I could talk to that said, we'll give you a little bit more time. I mean, it's Christmas time, right? Who are you going to get, and how are you going to get them over before Christmas to do all of this? And we went and did it, and then when I went to the board meeting on another issue, I brought it up, and everybody on the island was rather stunned, and then it came back to me that it had been this one person who lived on our island. He also decided that the day we opened our school in our new building, he put out a stop. He tried to cancel our C of O, and all the parents showed up, and they couldn't get in the building for the first day for classes. And so I don't know exactly what happened. I know the police were there and they said, you can't come in. And I had, because it was a little kids class, I probably had 60 parents, because we had 3 different classes of little kids. And I said, you tell the parents they can't come in now. Because we had already been told we could get in that day. And our C of O was fine, and he stopped it at the last minute. I don't know what exactly happened, but about 2 hours later, we were allowed in.